What if I told you the United States may have just spent $500 billion on the wrong version of the future? A future built on predictions that were never true, assumptions that never matched reality, and a green transition that might be headed in a direction nobody planned for. Today, we're asking a question almost too big to ignore. Has America misread the green future? Think about this. Roughly $500 billion. Between federal incentives, state programs, private investments, and subsidies, has been poured into electrification, renewable infrastructure, battery plants, charging networks, hydrogen pilots, carbon capture experiments, and more. That's $500 billion, not on wars, not on Wall Street bailouts, but on a bet. A bet that the future of energy is green, electric, and inevitable. The question isn't whether that dream is noble. Of course it is. Clean air, resilient power, cheaper energy, a livable climate. Who's arguing against that? The real question is whether the assumptions behind this massive pivot actually match reality, or whether the U.S. is steering blindly into a future where the pieces don't connect the way the planners thought they would. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The world is changing faster than the models expected, and not always in the direction policymakers bet on. If this were a movie, we'd be right at the part where the hero realizes the map they've been following might not be the map of the place they're actually in. Let me explain. When the big push toward EVs and renewables took off, the narrative was clear. Battery costs would keep falling, adoption rates would keep rising, and fossil fuels would naturally fade as the economics shifted. It wasn't a question of if, only how fast. But over the last few years, that simple storyline has gotten messy. Battery prices, once on a freefall, have seen volatility tied to mineral shortages, geopolitical bottlenecks, and supply chain crises. Consumers embraced EVs early, but mainstream adoption has slowed in several segments. Energy demand for data centers and AI is exploding faster than solar and wind installations can keep up. And utilities, struggling to modernize aging grids, warn that electrifying everything from cars to heat pumps could overwhelm systems never designed for that kind of load. That's not the narrative we were promised. And it raises a new question. Did the U.S. misread the pace, the economics, or even the direction of the green future? Let's zoom in on the EV landscape first. Over the last decade, the electric vehicle was treated like the symbol of progress, clean, futuristic, obvious. Billions of dollars were poured into production lines, gigafactories, charging networks. Automakers went all in, announcing the death dates of internal combustion engines like they were planning a funeral. But in 2024 and 2025, cracks started to show. Consumers didn't abandon EVs, far from it, but many began to hesitate. Range anxiety still exists. Charging infrastructure hasn't grown evenly across the country. Apartment dwellers, rural communities, and cold weather states face barriers no glossy commercial can fix. And let's not forget price. Even with incentives, EVs remain out of reach for many families, especially in a period of inflation. Meanwhile, hybrid sales, once dismissed as yesterday's technology, have surged back with a vengeance. Toyota, scolded for years for resisting the full EV push, suddenly looks like the company that knew the plot twist before everyone else. Hybrids are cheap, practical, familiar, and require no lifestyle change. And for millions of Americans, that matters more than anything else. So when you trace the $500 billion spent pushing pure electrification, you have to wonder, was the U.S. too certain about a future that consumers themselves weren't ready to commit to? But the story doesn't end with vehicles. Let's talk about the power grid, the literal backbone of the green transition. The vision was simple: electrify everything, and the grid will evolve to meet it. but the grid isn't evolving fast enough. In fact, in many regions, it's already straining. AI data centers are consuming staggering amounts of electricity. Bitcoin mining hasn't slowed down. Heat waves push peak demand past historical records. And on top of that, millions of EVs need charging, often at the exact same hours of the day. Utilities across the country warn that meeting projected demand could require the equivalent of building dozens of new power plants. Here's where it gets tricky. Renewable energy has made extraordinary progress. Solar is cheaper than ever. Wind capacity has grown dramatically. But the intermittency issue. The simple fact that the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow has not been solved at the scale policymakers expected. Long-duration battery storage, once marketed as the magic fix, is still in early development. Pumped hydro is geographically limited. Hydrogen storage is expensive and inefficient. So while renewables are growing, fossil fuels, especially natural gas, continue to stabilize the grid in ways we aren't ready to replace. And then, there's the geopolitical angle. A green future heavily dependent on lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, rare earth metals, and sophisticated chips means relying on supply chains dominated by countries like China, Chile, and the DRC. That's not inherently a problem. Global trade is normal, but it does raise the question of sovereignty. A country can't power its future alone, but it also can't afford to be vulnerable. And the U.S. is waking up to the reality that controlling oil doesn't automatically translate into controlling the minerals required for batteries, wind turbines, or solar panels. So the $500 billion turn toward electrification is also a turn toward supply chain dependencies that didn't get the same level of public debate. But perhaps the biggest oversight in the green transition isn't technological or geopolitical, it's psychological. Policymakers assumed that once cleaner options existed, people would adopt them quickly and enthusiastically. And while many have, millions more haven't. Americans don't all live in cities. They don't all have garages. They don't all want the same kind of car. They don't all see energy the same way. Some prioritize cost. Some prioritize convenience. Some prioritize independence. Some simply like the rumble of an engine or the reliability of old-school systems. You can't transform a country by assuming everyone thinks alike. This is the part where the story gets more interesting, not pessimistic, just realistic. Because the green future isn't dead, delayed, or doomed. It's simply different from the version written in policy documents. Technology is evolving in directions nobody predicted. The world is discovering that the future is probably not 100% electric, not 100% renewable, not 100% anything. It's a blend. Hybrids, synthetic fuels, advanced nuclear, geothermal, hydrogen, carbon capture, smarter efficiency, and yes, renewables and EVs. Not a straight line but a web. Look at nuclear. For years, it was treated like the forgotten uncle at the energy party. Too expensive, too slow, too political. Suddenly, small modular reactors are attracting billions in investment. States that once rejected nuclear are reconsidering. And as power demand skyrockets because of AI, nuclear is back in the conversation as a stable, clean, 24/7 power source. Geothermal, long ignored, is being revived thanks to drilling technologies borrowed from the oil and gas industry. Hydrogen, once a niche concept, is gradually finding practical use cases. Even fossil fuel companies are reinventing themselves, not because they suddenly love the planet, but because the economics demand it. They have the infrastructure, capital, and expertise to adapt, and many are doing exactly that. So when people ask whether the U.S. must read the green future, the answer isn't simply yes or no. It's more complicated. the US didn't misread the need for a cleaner energy future. That part is obviously real. What it misread is the path. Policymakers assumed a single solution when the world was always going to need many. They assumed the transition would be linear when transitions are always chaotic. They assumed the grid could adapt faster than real-world infrastructure allows. They assumed consumers would behave like spreadsheets instead of human beings. But here's the twist. This may actually be good news. When countries make bold bets, especially ones worth $500 billion, they force innovation. Even mistakes create breakthroughs. Failed factories create jobs. Abandoned prototypes become learning opportunities. Misaligned incentives still build infrastructure we didn't have before. The energy transition was never going to be perfect, but the momentum it created is real. Solar is cheaper. Wind is widespread. Batteries are improving. EVs are normal now, not exotic. The debate has shifted forever. The US didn't misread the green future so much as it misread how nonlinear that future would be. It assumed certainty in a world built on surprises. And now, standing halfway across the bridge it built, the country is realizing the other side looks different than the pamphlet described. But that doesn't mean turning back. It means course correcting. The future isn't pure electrification. It's electrification where it makes sense. It's hybrids where they work better. It's keeping natural gas as a stabilizer while pushing advanced nuclear. It's combining massive solar farms with smarter grid storage. It's building EVs for people who want them, not forcing them on people who don't. It's designing policy around real human behavior, not idealized projections. It means treating energy not as a moral battle, but as a systems challenge. It means realizing that innovation doesn't follow the timelines we set for it. It means acknowledging that the path to a cleaner future is messy, unpredictable, and almost always more expensive upfront than anyone wants to admit. And that's okay. Because the alternative, doing nothing, would cost far more. So has the US misread the green future? Yes, in some ways. No, in others. But the more honest answer is that everyone misread it. Europe, China, automakers, tech companies, environmentalists, skeptics. They all predicted a future that didn't arrive exactly as described. That's not a failure. That's reality. Progress isn't a straight line. It's a storm, a negotiation, a tug-of-war between ideals and practicalities.